I'd like to welcome everyone to Sunday school this morning. Trust everybody's having a good day. A nice swim to church this morning, I guess. I was telling somebody before church started, I know it's all my fault, the rains and all the flooding's happening because flood insurance got too expensive. So once I cancel it, I had it for 20 years, nothing, and now it's going to flood everything. That's about how it works, I guess. Brother Brian, would you mind opening our class with prayer for us today, please? And today we're continuing in our quarter study on miracles of Jesus. We're actually going to be on this subject for a while. This is actually the end of our second quarter, so it's 24 lessons. We've been looking at miracles. Today we're going to look at the miracle of the man born blind, and this is going to be our last lesson on the miracles of healing in our study. Today we're going to be looking at some doctrinal issues that probably have been debated for many years, and the Bible's pretty clear on it. Sometimes I listen to people debating stuff, and I'm like, you must not read the same Bible I do. That's not debatable. That's pretty much outlined. That's the case here. There's a lot of things that people misapply and misquote and don't. Sometimes I just think when they say stuff, they're not thinking about what they actually say until you look at it. So because we're trying to look at these kind of issues in this particular lesson, we're going to read the whole chapter. I know it's a lot to read and follow through, but if you want to turn to John chapter 9, it probably will be easier for you to keep up with me if you're following along as you read it. It's a shame that church has changed since when I was a kid. The preacher said John chapter 9, and all you heard was now everybody's click, 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 click. All right, so anyway, if you want to turn to John chapter 9, we're going to read the entire chapter. Here's what it says. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither has this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed and received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, and I washed, and do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They said unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him, and he that had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, who ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not, or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him, he shall speak for himself. These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, said his parents, he is of age, ask him. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise, we know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you did not hear. Wherefore would you hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, Why herein is a marvelous thing, that you know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind. If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sin, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he found him, he said unto them, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, Are we blind also? Jesus said unto them, If ye were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth. I know it's quite a lot to read to get in, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on in this miracle, probably more than we can cover in one lesson. So we're kind of going to hit some of the highlights about it. The first thing we can see is that it's dealing with a man who was born blind. We've studied some miracles with blind people being healed, but this was a little different because it wasn't like he became blind. He was born that way. He'd never seen anything. So after reading the story, the Bible believer should be convinced that all of the sickness and disease going around in this world is not necessarily the result of an individual's sin. A lot of people teach that it is, but that obviously can't be true, especially for this man. He was born blind. He couldn't have done anything wrong before he was born. Not this idea of sin being because of an individual sin, that's no more true than being rich or having great charisma is a sign of God's approval. There's plenty of rich people who don't serve the Lord. There's plenty of charismatic people who don't serve the Lord. I know not a popular name here, but I mean, Adolf Hitler was probably one of the most charismatic people in all of history. But he definitely wasn't serving the Lord. Again, we all are aware that the irresponsible act of parents can result in serious problems for their children. But it's foolish thinking to blame an infant's sickness or a handicap on the poor infant. It's not the child's fault. Our generation seems to be the worst one at blaming our failures, our shortcomings, our weaknesses on anything except for us. We blame the environment, we blame heredity, we blame our genetic makeup. God made me this way. Those are all not even good excuses. You see right through those right away. Jesus clearly cleared everything about this belief up. Cleared all that up. Neither the blind man nor his parents were the cause of his condition. He said it in the text we read straight out. So again, some things are right there in black and white. They're not debatable. I don't know why people debate that all the time. There is literally no room left to wonder or discuss this issue. Jesus said about the blind man being a sinner or his parents, neither, but that the works of God should be manifest in him. That's the whole reason. Sometimes I think in my mind, if we could get that through our head when things happen, it's not about us, it's about God. It's about Christ. It's about proclaiming Christ. Well, a lot of times things happen to us and it's an opportunity to proclaim Christ. And we miss the point because we're worried about us. Clearly, his condition was not the result of a particular person's sin, but rather for the purpose that the works of God could be manifest. And Jesus is telling them it's so they could be manifest. His whole life he's been blind for this moment. That's what he was there for. We talked about that in every one of these miracles. It's about the person. They need the miracle, but it's also about everybody who sees it. It's about everybody who hears about it. Believe it or not, all these miracles we've studied are about you and me. We're hearing about them. They're supposed to impact us. This clearly shows that God not only knows what's going to happen in our lives, but desires to use all of the circumstances surrounding our lives to manifest his works to us as well as those around us. By now, we should be established in the fact that the only reason for us is to house the Creator. The creation is to house the Creator, which enables us to see God in many things that others can't see him in. In verse 34 of our text, it reveals one of the sources of this bad teaching that sickness and disease is a result of sin. Here it says this in 34. They answered and said unto him, Thou was altogether born in sin, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. That's where this false idea comes from. All right. Second thing we need to point in this miracle of healing, besides he was born blind, is the unique method of the healing. We've kind of covered that in all these things. He can do it however he wants. There's no formula for healing. You can't do step 1, step 2, steps 3, step 4, I'm healed. It doesn't work like that. Christ does what he wants. So the method used to heal this blind man was perhaps the most unique we've studied so far. But it clearly shows, this method, the necessity of obedience is the same. Obedience is the necessary on our part, not the formula or how it's done. It's just be obedient to what God said. Verse 6 and verse 7 of our text says, paraphrasing here, Jesus spat on the ground, made clay out of the spittle, anointed the blind man's eyes, and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. That's what happened. Evidently, the blind man knew little or nothing about the spittle, because he didn't actually refer to that in his testimony when he was questioned. He didn't say he spit and made. He didn't say anything about that. But one of the most important things we can learn from the miracle is the value of the truth. There's a tremendous benefit available to us if we just operate in the truth and deal in the reality. Many people today over-exaggerate what occurred in an effort to appeal to the masses. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Somebody receives a miracle, they add a little bit to it to make it more interesting. Or they add a little bit to make the condition seem worse than it was, so it's far more miraculous that they try to make their version seem more exciting. In the process of doing all that, you lose the blessings and the promises and the touch of God in the meantime. Surely we can appreciate the way this man got to the point. He didn't add anything to make the story better. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I can't be the only one who often makes the story better. You know, like my fish was this big. See, I'm not lying. You're just looking at it wrong. You got to look right here. All right? We do that all the time. But not this man. He told it like it was. After Jesus made the mud pack and placed it in the man's eyes, he said, go wash in the pool of Siloam. So clearly here we see the necessary ingredient in the whole equation is obedience, because verse 11 records the words of the blind man in response to the instructions of Jesus. Jesus said it, he did it. The last few words of that verse again, it's his testimony. I went and washed and I received sight. He was obedient. He did what he was told. So in spite of the circumstances, I'm blind forever, and this guy comes and puts mud in my eyes, and now I'm going to be able to see. It makes absolutely no sense in the natural, but that is what Christ said to do, and Christ is not operating in the natural. All right? This particular pool, think about this, pool of Siloam, it was known for a very foul smell. And yet that didn't keep the blind man from obeying the words of Jesus. He went his way and washed and came seeing. Look, he's blind. His nose works. He knew when he got to that pool what it smelled like. He may not have couldn't see it. If it's as bad as some of the stuff I read about this pool, he knew what that smelled like from a quarter mile away, all right? It wasn't a clean pool, for sure. How many of you know that it's not important if Jesus used spit or not, or if that's the dirtiest pool of water in all of town? What's important is, what did God tell you to do? Think through that. How many times do you think you personally have missed a miracle because Christ was telling you to do something and you're like, ooh, ooh, that's gross. Well, if you want to be healed, you got to do gross. You go get in the pool like he told you to. Or what? How many of you have missed a miracle because people are watching me? What will they say? I don't know. I try to picture it. I'm picturing this guy. He's blind. We all know. They know he's blind. I picture him trotting on down the road, going to the pool of Siloam, and we're like, what in the world is he doing? Get out of there. But he's doing what God told him to do. If everyone's making fun of you or not, we got to follow and be obedient. Even if it's the Sabbath day, they brought that up in the scripture. Here we have a man who had never seen the light of day. He'd never seen anything. But because of his obedience, he can now see everything. It didn't matter if it never been done that way before. It didn't matter if it was gross and smelly. How many of y'all, if you couldn't see, would put up with a little stinky to be able to see again? That'll bring us to the third point, is it doesn't matter what other people think or what they say. Look at some of the things they said. It's in the text. Some of them said, is not this he? Is that not the blind guy? Some said, that's him. The thing that really matters, though, is not what we know or understand. It's rather that we're honest. Because look what the man said. I am he. He stuck right with it. Who can argue with the reality of I am he? The one that's seeing right now. I'm that guy that couldn't see. You can't argue with that fact. The interaction in this story is pretty real to life. They asked the man, how were thine eyes open? No doubt this man had been the talk of the town on many occasions because of the condition he was in. At other times, he was probably neglected for the same reason of the condition he was in. But on this day, he was the hottest object in town because of the miracle. Everybody was talking about this guy. It's a great day for us when people are talking about the wonderful miracle God has performed in us instead of our past condition. He's probably a lot happier having people talking about him seeing than he was people ridiculing him because he couldn't see and making fun of him because he's stumbling around and he can't figure out where he's going. During this kind of time, when they're talking about the miracle of God in us instead of what we used to be or where we came from or what used to be wrong with us, during these times, we should avoid the temptations of glorifying our testimonies. Rather, we should just tell it like it is. If God delivered you from drugs, you don't need to go out and give all these horrific details. Tell them what happened. I was a drug addict and I met the Lord and now I'm not anymore. That right there is way more powerful than trying to put your side of all that into everything. Just tell it like it is. Don't try to impress people. Seek to give glory to God, not to you. This guy can see, but he had enough sense to realize he didn't have anything to do with it. He even said, I don't know this guy from anybody. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know who he is. I don't know. All I know is he touched me and I can see. Christ does not need nor want our assistance. He doesn't want any of that. He just wants our willingness to faithfully testify the truth. Testify the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That's where we need to stay. Think about this. There is no way that we can overemphasize the value of telling the whole truth. When he was brought to the Pharisees, this man, they became more interested in what day of the week it was rather than rejoicing with the man who just received the miracle. I'm thinking, how blind can you be? This guy, you know him, you've seen him his whole life, he can't see, and now he can see. and you're more worried about what day of the week he was able to see on. How did you receive your sight? Don't you? I like his simple reply. He put clay on my eyes, I washed, and do see. Plain, simple, to the point. That'll bring us to the fourth point we want to look at today, is this mixed multitude that was there to see this miracle. We've talked about this in most of the previous lessons. Almost every miracle we've studied so far, there was Christ, the person they performed the miracle for. There were some Jews. There were some Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious. There were just some everyday old people walking around minding their own business who just stumbled across it and saw it. All kind of different things. There's always a mixed multitude wherever Jesus is found. Look at what some of these people said. It's verse 16, John 9. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? There was a division among them. Verse 17, they said unto the blind man again, what sayest thou of him? And he hath opened thine eyes. He said, he is a prophet. Look at the three different versions of the same event. This man is not of God. They saw the same thing as the people that said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? They said, they saw and witnessed the same thing that the man did who said he is a prophet. The blind man was right. He's more than a prophet. Malachi 4:2 says, but unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. He's way more than just a prophet. But isn't it interesting that all these groups heard exactly the same thing, and all of them arrived at a different conclusion? In my mind, that says a lot about what's in our heart, what's in our mind, what we fill our thoughts with. You think they affect what you see? Do you think they affect what you hear? Because of their experience in life, they all interpreted this in a different manner. It's important what you see. It's important be careful little eyes what you see. Be careful little ears what you, anybody besides me ever sang that song when you was like 4? I'll put that in. Songs are important. That's where you get there. That'll bring us to our fifth point. The certain truth. The Jews, the Pharisees, all that group, they didn't believe because they chose not to. By now, they had been given ample opportunity to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Again, this is the final miracle that we record here in all that we've studied. They've had a chance to know who he is. They knew who he was. They knew what he said. But because they had no power over control over him, they went against his life-changing words and against his miraculous works, ultimately rejecting the Son of God. I brought this out in one of the way earlier lessons when we're coming up on Easter time here, the crucifixion and all that. They didn't accidentally crucify the Son of God. They knew exactly who he was. They don't even let him pretend, oh, well, we didn't mean to. We didn't realize it was you. Yeah, they did. They knew exactly who he was, and they're rejecting him because he threatens them. Well, guess what? We come fast forward to today. There's people who won't accept the Lord, not because they don't know, but because giving themselves to him threatens themselves. They would rather choose themselves than choose him. So when we talk about, the end of time, I don't know all the answers about what the afterlife's like. I know this, though. If you end up in heaven, it's going to be because you chose to go there. If you end up in hell, it's going to be because you chose to go there. You're not accidentally going to get in either one. It's not like you're born into this world and whatever happens, happens, and some people go to heaven and some people don't. Everybody gets a chance to make up their own mind. When you make up your mind, God's going to put you in whichever one you chose. Man, in my mind, one of the good things about heaven is going to be you chose to be there. One of the terrible things about hell is you're going to know you chose to be there too. Isn't it amazing that a person will go through all kind of things to defend their opinion, or their position in spite of what's obviously right and true. They can't deny this man can see. They can't deny that no man ever has done anything like this before. This is the Messiah. It's blatantly clear. But they're going to defend their position that he's a liar by calling the man whose sight was restored a liar and a sinner. The blind man operated off of what he knew and experienced, but the religious operated off of what they perceived to be right, in spite of what they witnessed and in spite of what was true. You know, the devil has come to kill, steal, and destroy. We say that passage all the time. Why do people make it so easy for him to do it? They make it simple for him. Notice again the words of the blind man. Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. That's how he started off operating on his encounter with Christ. I don't know. I never met the guy before. I don't know not too much about it. Here's what I do know, though. Before I met him, I couldn't see, and now I can. Y'all can see where that's going to lead him to start wondering about this guy who did perform the miracle. So if we operate on what we know to be true, that'll keep us walking in the truth and will keep us from being influenced by the mixed multitude. He was not going to let the multitude convince him that this man was some kind of evil, vile devil, because he experienced being able to see because of this man. Not operating in what we know to be true brings acceptance from the multitude, but it will also cause us to miss the truth altogether. When you know the Lord's told you something and all your friends are harping on you about do this, come with us, do this anyway, if you hearken to that, they'll accept you, but then you're going to be going the wrong way with the Lord. We need God to help us have a greater fear of being spiritually blind than we have of being kicked out of the religious system. There is, in fact, more spiritual blindness in a religious system than there is outside of a religious system. This is just me. The religious world's more spiritually blind than the guy sitting in the bar. At least the guy sitting in the bar knows he probably shouldn't be there, and especially when he gets home, he realizes, wakes up in the morning, shouldn't have did that. The religious just keeps right on doing it and is okay with it. That'll bring us to our sixth point, the fallacy of religious leadership. It's obvious in the study of the miracles of Jesus that it doesn't matter how many times the religious witness the truth. If their mind's made up, they're never going to change it. Well, I don't say never. On their own, they're not. Christ coming in their heart can change their heart, then they will. If Jesus himself did not change them, we're foolish to think we are. History will never be more important than what God is presently doing. In our text, they were making sure that everyone knew that they were Moses' disciples, and Moses didn't even get into the promised land. Even the examples they use are terrible examples. He's a sinner, you're a sinner, we're Moses' disciples. Moses didn't even get there. One greater than Solomon was present with them, not just a prophet, but a priest or a king, and they're talking about Moses. Not only did the religious give the healed man a hard time, they were also emphatic of their belief that God had spoke to Moses, yet they did not acknowledge Jesus and who he really was and where he came from. Who do you think has a bigger voice for the Lord, Moses or Jesus? I mean, I'm not knocking Moses. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're following what a preacher says more than what God says, you're in trouble. They were the religious authorities, yet they would not admit where the man Jesus came from, the one that had done what no other man could do since the world began. So unless a man be God or be sent from God, he could not do what they just saw. The leadership of a religious system wants to keep people in bondage. Notice the parents of the blind man. They were more concerned about being excommunicated than they were identifying with their son's miracle. The ones who had witnessed all of the difficulties of his blindness were in such a bondage they were willing to let him stand alone in his healing. You think your friends here on earth are going to stick with you anytime? They're not. All right? His own parents wouldn't stand with him. He's right. They're wrong, and they still don't see it. We can't allow the church or a doctrine or spiritual leadership to cause us not to be truthful. The truth is the part that matters. It appears that the parents knew who healed their son because of the reason that they responded the way they did. They responded in fear of being excommunicated. The implication being they knew he was the Messiah. They knew the religious didn't want to recognize him as Messiah. So if I identify with him as being the Messiah, then I'm putting myself against the religious who are in charge of all that. Well, we do the same thing all the time. You know when God's dealing with your heart, and you don't come down the aisle because you're worried about somebody else thinks. You're worried about what so-and-so will say. You're worried about what your friends will say. You would rather appease your friends and stay in good with them than answer the call that the Lord's pushing on your way. It's amazing that a religious system would get such a foothold that everyone who does not agree with it must be in error and is therefore a sinner. The religious, the very ones who should have rejoiced the most, were the ones who gave the healed man the hardest time, the most trouble. The reality of our story is the one who could not see in the beginning, because of his obedience and willingness to operate in the truth, could in fact now see better than anyone else. He not only had eyesight to see physically, he can see spiritually. That's toward the end. We'll see it. So the problem in the church world today is oftentimes it operates outside of spiritual authority, which causes spiritual blindness. If we could just get it through our head, none of this is about us. It's about Christ. The interesting thing to me is, this is just me again, Christ desires us. So by making it about us, we're leaving him. If we make it about him, he meets all of us. We receive what we need through giving it all to him. Forget about you, focus on him. He'll take better care of you than you possibly ever could. Again, the fact is the true church will always leave people free to follow Christ, not bound by their preconceived ideas about Christ. This is how it is. To me, it's easy to see that even in the natural. I mean, I know people that I've met. My grandpa was a Democrat. My papa was a Democrat. I'm voting for Democrat. They don't even know what these people stand for. How do I know? Well, look at our world. Look at what's going on in government. I'm thinking, how can people vote for this guy? Well, that's because it's always like that. I know people that were in a Republican. I'm voting for the Republican. It don't matter. He could be the biggest crook. I think of one about 1970 something. and people vote for him just because you're supposed to. When are you going to stand up and make up your own mind? In the physical sense, but even more importantly in the spiritual. Don't let the religious world tell you what Christ means. Talk to Christ and meet him, and he'll tell you what he means. Who do you think is going to give you the better story about what Christ wants you to do? Christ himself or Moses? Or somebody else? It's like the story of the man that was sitting in the front stairs of this big church, and the Lord appeared to him and said, "What's wrong?" The man responded and said, "They won't let me in." And the Lord said, "Oh, don't worry. I've been trying to get in there for years, and they won't let me in either." The story illustrates an unfortunate truth. We should remember, if we'll just say what we know, stay true to that which has been done and revealed unto us, then Jesus will come looking for us when others have turned their backs on us. It's at times when all other sources of security have been removed that we're in the best position to hear from Christ. He will move in. In fact, sometimes these things have to be removed in order for us to hear him. It's good to know that when we obey and operate off of what we know, Jesus will find us. It's right there in the story. He's excommunicated, he's out, and Christ finds him. You don't see Christ looking for them Pharisees and Sadducees. Who's Christ looking for? He's looking for the man. The most important thing for every human being is to decide what they're going to do with the Son of God. Jesus finds the man and asks him a question in order to help him prepare for divine revelation. So get the context here. He's never been able to see. He meets Christ. He can see. His version of the story is, I don't know nothing about this guy. Here's what I do know. I couldn't see, and now I can. Oh, you're excommunicated. Now he's off over here, and guess who finds him? Christ. And when Christ finds him, he asks him these questions. Dost thou believe? Look at his reply. Who is he, Lord, that I might believe him? So because of the miracle, he's open to the possibility that this is the Christ. This is who he says he is. When Christ says, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. Now Christ has showed him that I am who I said I am. He's accepted that. Catch the scene. Blind all your life. Jesus heals you. The religious world turns on you. Parents hang you out to dry. You've really not done anything except been blind your whole life and then told the truth when you can see, and now you're kicked out on your ears. But we can know that it is worth it when Jesus went looking for him. Look, I'll tell you now, if you don't know the Lord and you come to know the Lord, your friends aren't going to like that. Oh, well, sometimes your parents won't like that. I got some friends whose parents kicked them out the house when we were in high school. You know, well, we're Catholic and you're not going to do that. You can't go to that church. Get out. Well, is it worth it? Yeah, because when you tell the truth and you operate off of what you know, Christ will meet you where you are, and it's going to be better than anything you can imagine. It's better to be sought by Jesus than accepted by the worldly crowd. It's better to be sought by Jesus than accepted by the religious crowd. The beginning of a new life. The man said, I believe. Believe in truth is the beginning of true and genuine worship. I believe, and then it says, and he worshiped him. That's where it all started. That'll bring us to our last point we'll look at is real blindness. Since Jesus is the light of the whole world, and in many cases the religious have turned their backs on him, then we can rest assured he's going to find someone somewhere to shine through. This is one of the things I think we miss, that a lot of Christians miss. We associate Christianity with being church. I can remember as a kid, are you a Christian? Yeah. Have you witnessed? Well, yeah, I invite people to church all the time. Y'all catching that, right? Inviting people to church is not witnessing, all right? That's inviting people into the religious system. I'm not saying this church is religion. That's not what y'all get what I'm saying, though, right? It's not about going to church. It's about knowing who God is. It's about talking with Jesus Christ. So Jesus didn't just come to restore the sight to the blind, but to bring judgment against those in error who try to make everyone think that they are able to see and know the truth. Jesus coming into the world has brought spiritual blindness into the religious and spiritual insight to those who will operate in obedience to what is true. The system is just as blind as the rest of the world, maybe even more so. The question for us to consider is, are we spiritually blind? Think about some from our story, about the characters that were in our story. We can see some spiritual blindness. They include things like this: trying to make everyone else but yourself a sinner. If you're calling everybody else in the world a sinner except for you, deliberately neglect to see and know things that you should. You hear it. The preacher says it. The Holy Spirit's got it in your head. This is what you need to do. Well, I'm not doing that. Now you're in trouble. If you're not blind, you're getting blinder. Make other people think you understand something that you really don't. Anybody besides me ever met super Christian who obviously doesn't know what they're talking about, but they sure do got a convincing story? Lastly, appearing to be more spiritual than you are. Any four of these things, that's all blindness. You're heading the wrong way. The truth is, if we are still doing any of these things, we're still in sin. If we will not walk in the light while He's with us, then He will make it His business to shine on someone else, and we'll be found walking in darkness because we refuse to see and believe. Again, we're the ones who are making the choice here. You're the one that's got to make up your mind. In conclusion, it's the same for everybody here this morning. What are you going to do with Jesus? Are we going to appear to everyone to be religious and know everything about God? Or are we going to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and not worry about church membership over that which we found to be true? It's our belief that once this blind man could see, he operated in obedience to what he knew was true and followed Jesus all the way to Calvary. Well, if Christ will do this for this blind man, he'll do it for us. In my mind, there's a lot of church folk who can't see, and they need to talk to the Lord and get on the right track where he can open their eyes. If we will follow the example of this blind man, we can follow Jesus all the way to glory. It literally is just that simple. Open your eyes and look at the truth. Thank you all very much. Next week, even though we're starting a new quarter, we're still looking at miracles. We're going to be looking at miracles over nature, I think, is what the next quarter is. So there's a lot of miracles, so we'll be here for a while. I think there's 2 more quarters of that. Anyway, thank you all very much. You'll have a good day.